You're welcome to Business Daily on Trust TV, and I hope that you had a marvelous Christmas celebration. Well, my name is Chamun Dabeng. Let's talk numbers. We're starting off with the market this morning. You're welcome back, and once again, my name is Chamun Dabeng. All right, so as the year comes to an end, we're going to be recapping some of the biggest economical moves made by the Nigerian federal government, and there's been quite a few of them. Yes, we're going to be taking a look at how they are going to impact the economy in 2020. And the first move that we're going to be talking about today is the Petroleum Industry Act. Now, the Petroleum Industry Act has been 20 years in the making. After rejection, suspensions, and approvals, President Muhammadu Buhari signed the Petroleum Industry Act into law on the 16th of August 2021. Now, for those of you who do not know, the main objective of the PIA is to overhaul and transform the Nigerian oil gas industry and create a more conducive environment for growth of the sector and addressing legitimate grievances of communities most impacted by the extractive industries. Now, joining me in the studio today is policy analyst Faiz Mohammed Ali, and political enthusiast Joseph Ago. You're both welcome to the show. It's great to have you here.
Thank you.
Yes, so starting off, what are your thoughts on the PIA? Long time coming, or is it too late?
Like you rightly said, it's a 20-year culmination of the federal government's efforts to reform the sector. I think rather than being too late, really what it is a commendable effort, especially on the part of all the parties involved, especially the National Assembly, to bring it to this stage. Now, the oil industry has changed significantly in the past 20 years when the push for reform started. Militancy, while still an issue, has diminished significantly. There have been new oil explorations all across West Africa. And so Nigeria is no longer the only player in this particular region. Also, the world has moved from a position where we are fully carbon-based to looking at renewable sources of energy and net zero as serious policy initiatives. And this means that while the Act itself could be considered a gold standard for the development of natural resources, it's also in some ways a missed opportunity for us to reform the sector towards dependency away from oil specifically. I do think that currently, when you look at the provisions of the Act, I do think it makes all the right moves. For example, bifurcating the NNPC into two specific sectors, one for the upstream and one for downstream and midstream. Also ensuring that the NNPC, which was a perennially loss-making organization in the past, becomes a commercially driven profit venture. It also makes an attempt, at least, at creating a framework for a new tax policy and good governance and accountability within the oil and gas sector. However, I do think that there are still issues of concern, specifically when it comes to host community development, and certainly when it comes to matters of transparency, even as it stands. But on the whole, I do think it's the act is a commendable effort by the government to see to a reform that has been 20 years in the making.
Yeah. All right, Joseph, what do you think? Long time coming or too late? And you also feel that it actually addresses the actual problems that Nigeria is facing today?
Of course, the original bill is not what we have now. I mean, there are several modifications that have happened to that original bill.
That have been made over the years.
But like they say in most English-speaking parts of the world, better late than never. So as much as this is a little bit too late, it is a very, very good step in the right direction. And of course, we have laws in this country. I mean, we have one of the most beautiful set of laws in this country. The problem is always with implementation. So my concern here is not about how verbose or how beautiful this bill is or this act is. My concern really is about how we implement and how we go about really addressing the challenges this bill or this act was supposed to address in the first place. So, I mean, implementation basically is my concern.
Okay. Faiz, you agree that implementation may be a problem, looking at the way past governments and, you know, the federal government itself has actually handled implementation of policies and actually stepping up and making these changes to better the economy. Would you say that they've actually done it properly, or would you feel like it needs to be done in a better way?
I do think there are a few concerns when it comes to the policy initiatives contained within the Act. The issue certainly is not the framework itself, but just like Mr. Abbo said, it has more to do with the political will and the political motivation of the actors involved in order to ensure that the policy is followed through with. There are certain issues. For example, when you look at the complexity of the bill, there are sections of it that come away with obtuse language. For example, there isn't much of a definition of what a host community
is,
or what frontier basin really means within the Act. And these have implications for revenue generation, really. When you say a host community, for example, does that mean the indigenous communities where the oil is found? Does that mean any community through which a pipeline passes through? All of these have implications on how the revenue is shared and what percentage each community gets. But I don't think the bill is very clear on that. And that's an indication, I believe, of political considerations making way into policy initiatives. I remember the managing director of the NNPC, who hails from the northern region, was quoted as saying that he feels as though the bill as it comes now will be very beneficial to northern states because as it stands now, there have been oil discoveries in quite a few states, and he feels that because the initiatives contained within the frontier basin exploration part of the Act will divest a lot of investment into new exploration for those regions. Now, I don't think those are very helpful statements to make, especially when you're trying to create an oil and gas policy that is region neutral, especially considering the fact that it took a very long time to get to the stage. So when you see statements like that, you can ascertain just how much politics and regionalism is going to play into some of the policy initiatives. But as the framework itself is concerned, I think we've come a long way from what it used to be, in that the NNPC's activities were really very opaque. I remember coming across information that the Kaduna refinery had never made profit since its inception. Turning the NNPC into a commercially driven venture makes that virtually impossible. At the very least, there's going to have to be reporting on a regular basis. So I do think the reforms, the policy reforms as they're stated, specifically when it has to do with host communities, is a step in the right direction. even though there are issues that still need to be addressed.
All right, so let's take a look at oil's contribution to Nigeria's GDP from quarter 4 of 2018 to quarter 3 of 2021. Now you can easily see that there are fluctuations in the table here that we have. Now let's also take a look at the trade composition overview for 2021. So 66.38% of Nigeria's export is made up of crude oil. Now, what do you think of these figures, and what does this mean for the Nigerian economy? Let me start off with you, Joseph.
If you look at Nigeria's economy is heavily reliant on crude oil. I mean, crude oil is just 10%. Quarter
3 of 2021, it didn't even make up to 10%. It was at 7.49%.
It's 10% of our GDP, but it accounts for 90% of our foreign exchange and 65% of our revenue, that's government revenue. So, Nigeria is in a fix, and since the days of Obasanjo, there was this call around diversification, and the idea was to move. During Obasanjo's time, NLNG was brought on board, and we're looking at other alternatives to petrol, so encouraging the use of gas, even in the automobile sector. But the problem has always been that there is just these funny activity around just relaxing or just taking our hands off the steering and just relaxing on maybe
and just basically letting oil drive the car.
Windfall from oil. For example, if we only talk about diversification when the prices of oil is down, then once there's a spike, everybody just relaxes and goes back to the original position. So it is very, very important that we really see the end of this act and ensure that all the players involved are really put into very, very close scrutiny, because we shouldn't, as much as there are gray areas in the act, we should also see as how much gain we can draw from this act. And of course, this act lays some form of transition to other sources of energy. There is also a part that speaks about natural gas. Nigeria is the largest, has the largest gas reserve in Africa, but when you look at Nigeria is third behind Algeria and Egypt in terms of gas generation. So we have these things, but we are not really maximizing these things, and it's because there's very, very lazy, there's lazy money coming from the sale of crude oil. So it's very important for us to really put this act to test and ensure that all the players involved.
Well, how much is really coming in at this point, especially with the fact that Nigeria has been unable to make up its quota, the required OPEC plus quota?
As much as there is vandalism, as much as there is oil theft, as a matter of fact, there is news that we underreport.
It's also the aspect of corruption.
Yes, we underreport how much barrels of crude oil leave Nigeria, for example. So there is a wide, corruption situation here. But it's very important for us to really see how this bill really address those challenges. And if, for example, one gray area in the bill is the role of the Minister for Petroleum. It's really, NNPC is now commercialized, and the bill stipulates that 6 months, there's a 6 months window for NNPC to become fully commercialized. And even after that 6 months window, that old kernel, that old NNPC form will still subsist with the commercialized NNPC entity. But so there is a lot of gray areas, but for me anyway, as much as there are gray areas, we should see how this can be tested. Then if we see that there are problems in the way, we can, of course, go the way of amendments.
All right, so still taking a look at the PIA, how sustainable is this plan? really? Because even when you take a look at it, of course, we can't have this discussion without talking about fuel subsidy removal, which is taking place next year in June. So far, there's been 2 days that have been thrown out, February and June, but I believe it's going to happen in June of 2022. Now, looking at the amount of money that has been spent on fuel subsidy and the, should I say, the solution that has been provided to, or the thing that is now going to replace fuel subsidy is now a transport palliative for 40 million Nigerians. And this actually costs twice as much as what is being spent on fuel subsidy already. So how sustainable is that solution, and how does it really affect the Nigerian economy? If you're talking about saving money but spending more money in order to provide a solution, does it really add up?
So I think it's one of the reasons that the bill I was earlier saying is certainly a missed opportunity, but not a lost opportunity to institute some change. It's easy to look at the oil industry and the Nigerian economy in a vacuum, really, but it's also important to recognize that we are right now also at the mercy of the world market. And there are changes that are happening that are, to a certain extent, outside the control of the federal government. Now, when it comes specifically to the issue of the fuel subsidy, it's interesting because when the suggestion was made that the NNPC should be bifurcated, or sorry, the DPR should be bifurcated into two specific industries, one for upstream and one for downstream, one of the criticisms was that what we're doing really is creating more bureaucracy instead of using those particular funds and investing them into renewable energy, for example, which is future-proof, rather than what we're doing now seems to be really kicking the ball down the road. I think it's important to look at it in terms of how long it's going to take versus what is that's happening right now. And what is that's happening right now is we're not entirely sure exactly how the fuel subsidy or the removal of the fuel subsidy is going to affect the economy moving into 2022. What we can say for sure is that inflation will increase. But other than that, is the PIA going to have a negative effect or a positive effect on the fuel subsidy or vice versa? That's something that depends strictly on the form of implementation that takes place, and it's something that we're just going to have to wait and see as the new year starts.
All right. Joseph.
I mean, full subsidy for a start was a very bad idea, and we have been on this for a very long time, and that has just picture this. Nigeria is surrounded by Niger Republic, Chad, Cameroon, Benin Republic, and Nigeria sells petrol the cheapest. So what fuel subsidy has done is that it has created room for cross-border racketeers. So, I mean, there's news that petroleum products leave Nigeria and end up in these African countries. So, and of course, we saw what happened with the fuel subsidy probe by a certain Senate, and how that report was swept under the carpet. How many people, I mean, have been punished or made to face the full weight of the law. So, fuel subsidy really left. And we saw how, if you compare fuel subsidy and fertilizer subsidy, for example, how that ended with the former, fertilizer subsidy ended with the former Minister of Agriculture, that's under Goodluck Jonathan. And now that created room for private sector involvement in the production of fertilizer. So, I mean, the removal of fuel subsidy is something that should have been done a long time ago. And speaking about the palliative arrangements in lieu of fuel subsidy, that too is very, very problematic, because what we should be thinking about is how we can implement sector palliatives, or I mean, build funds that will go to sectors. For example, there are sectors that touch the average Nigerian. Transportation sector is one. Agricultural sector is one. The health sector is another. Education. So why can't we take that huge amount of money and put in these sectors. I mean, the other day I spoke about monorail, for example. I mean, between Abuja and Nasarawa states, you see that's a huge number of people that leave. I mean, we can create working and efficient transportation systems that will take these people from these places and bring them to Abuja and back to where they live. The same can also happen between Niger and the FCT, and also Kaduna and the FCT. But these handouts would also create room for corrupt practices. We saw what happened with palliatives during COVID-19, how a lot of this money is, till date, still not accounted for. All we have is just headline statements. I mean, and running into billions of naira. So we should really think through, because of course there's no budgetary allocation for subsidy. So it is clear that subsidy will not exist in 2022. The commercialization of NMPs is also another indicator that subsidy will not be in 2022. So as a matter of fact, NMPs is supposed to be fully commercialized in February, meaning that that subsidy regime would end around February. So
hopefully,
I want to advise that rather than give handouts, we should approach this palliative scene sectorially and not.
All right. So still on the fuel subsidy itself. So once subsidy is actually removed, fuel prices are going to go up to about 320 to 340 naira per litre. Now, the people who are going to end up suffering the brunt of this effect is going to be the final consumer, and that's the Nigerians out there. Those are the people that are running their businesses. Those are the people that are running factories. You know, they are going to have to put up their prices in order for them to actually make a profit. So what is the future of Nigerian businesses, and what does this actually mean for the Nigerian populace? The 40 million poorer Nigerians that we have out there that are probably just struggling to survive. I
mean, it's not bleak. It's not entirely a dark future, because what's the removal of fuel subsidy, like, you know, the example is fertilizer subsidy. Once it was removed, there was foreign investment in that sector. There will be a number of foreign players that will come. I mean, bring innovation in transportation, bring innovation into storage, bring innovation into marketing. And what we're going to have is liberalized petroleum prices. So, for example, the filling station down the road can be selling at 360. Because somebody has a superior logistics arrangement, he can sell his petrol lesser. But what the government has to do is the government has to determine what the ceiling is. No, because if you leave it just open, Nigerians are very, very...
People will take advantage of it.
People will take advantage of it. So a number, I mean, there are technologies to transportation. There are technologies to storage. I mean, there are technologies around marketing. And these technologies are not getting into Nigeria yet because government is still subsidizing petroleum products. So the moment that is off, you'll see a number of innovative approaches to pricing in Nigeria.
I think the regulatory framework of the PIA will also help in that regard, because one of the interesting things is that between 2015 and 2020, there's been $70 billion worth of investment in the oil and energy sector within West Africa. But I think only 5% of that or so has actually gone into Nigeria. There have been competitors that have sprung up all over the region that have taken away what investment would usually go to the largest oil producer. And that really has to do with the opacity of our systems and how difficult the regulatory framework is to move around in this country. The introduction of the PIA will hopefully go a long way to changing that in such a way that not only will it attract foreign investment, but it will also make domestic institutions more liable to the public, and so they're more likely to follow what the rules are.
All right, thank you very much for that. Unfortunately, we do not have enough time. But yes, 2022 is just a few days away, and we're hoping that all of the policies and, changes that the government has made in preparation of 2022 will pan out and, help out the Nigerian economy and also the poor Nigerians out there. All right, so I'd like to say a big thank you to my guests in the studio. Thank you so much, Mr. Joseph, and thank you so much, Mr. Faiz, for being a part of the show. And to all our viewers out there, thank you so much for watching. Yes, come back again for more Business Daily. Let's talk numbers.